Welcome to part 2 of the AR build, the AR9 build. This is the EPC lower portion of the build. This promises to be easy though. So what we have, we're going to put in the bolt catch release, the bolt catch spring in the detent. This comes with a threaded roll pin, so we're going to just use a 1/16 wrench, hex wrench, and get that backed out. Backing it on out. There we go. So I can just hand do it from there, and I'm going to remove it just like that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop my spring in along with the detent on top. There you go. I'm going to take my bolt catch mechanism, install it like so. Oop, there it is. And, oh, pickles. Dropped it. Hold it in place and just kind of fish it around until I can thread this bit through. Get it started with my hand. Great. Finish it up with the 1/16 hex wrench. And it will stop. It won't let you over thread it. You just thread it to tightness. Test for function. And there we go. Now let's move on to the next part. Next, we're going to install the front pivot pin. You're going to, in your kit, in your lower part kit, your front pivot pin, if I can get this to focus, is going to be the longest pivot pin. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our pivot pin spring, drop it in the little hole right up here. There you go. I'm going to use needle nose pliers to help me keep it in place. And the detent that we're going to use is, if I can get it in focus, excuse my dirty fingernails, has an arrow shell underneath, is that double-sided detent. That's the one you're going to use for this one. So I'm going to clamp these up with my needle nose pliers. I might actually have to get in there with my hand. Yep, there it goes. This is often the most difficult part, and I might even have to clip the spring. I try to avoid clipping the spring, but sometimes you just got to do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this blade to try to press it down. Yeah, it's going to be tricky. Let's see if we can get it seated in there. There we go. I think we're on to something. Oh, good Lord. That thing shot like a bullet. I almost lost that thing. It shot out like a rocket. With the needle nose blade. Oh, good. Got it with the blade. Good. Got it down. Okay, got this in place. Excellent. And that is in place. If I could just get it pushed in now. There we go. Got it. Woo! And that is often the hardest part. The back one is not nearly as hard, but we got that one done, and we're done. There we go. A little oil, and it'll go right as rain. That's the hardest part of the build for a lot of people, and it definitely is for me. So we got the front one in. Now let's move to the next step. Now we are ready for the grip and the safety selector. So let's get to it. So we have, with the parts kit, we got the complete parts kit, but I chose to go with the MOE K2 grip. So that's what we're going to roll with today. So as you see here, there's a hole. That's where our screw is going to go through in the middle. Our spring for the safety selector and the as well as the detent is going to go in the, well, the spring's going to go in the hole and the detent's going to go into the lower. So let's get started with that. So here I have my spring. I'm going to carefully drop my spring in the hole there, like so. Get in the focus. Put that slightly to the side without spilling my spring. I'm going to put my safety selector into the lower with the, oh, if I can get it up. Let's see here, what am I doing here? There we go. Safety selector with the throw switch pointing to fire. There we go. So from there, I'm going to flip it over, take my detent, the one that's shaped like a bullet, drop it in this hole. You can see that. The contrast, excuse it. Point down into the hole. And there we go. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to carefully put my spring in without creasing it. I don't want to kink the spring. And that's the worst way to do it, is how I'm doing it right now. So let's reset this. So I'm going to get this here. So the spring is in. Let's get this out of the way. Here we go. Flip that up. Carefully. Oh, that's a snug fit too. Oh yeah, snug. So what I'm going to do, before I put that spring on, I'm going to go ahead and get this on for fitting, because I don't want this to just pop on, and this will be so easy to dent that spring. So while I get this on for fitting, talk amongst yourselves. So we've done it a few more times, and I'm telling you guys, it's a snug fit. It's so snug that when I put it in, it's actually shaving the polymer from the inside of the grip. So it's a very tight fit. That one went a lot better. And I think that went with, well, that one got on. I don't think we kinked the spring. I hope we didn't anyway. So what we're going to do now is we're going to test function. It's working. And I'm just going to snug this up a little bit more before we screw it down. Get it good and snug there. So now what I'm going to do, I feel like it's good and snug. Now we're going to screw the screw on in there into the handle. I'm trying to get it to where I can see it and stay in the camera view at the same time. There we go. I think you guys can see what I'm doing here. I'm going in. I can see the hole. Get it started. And I just screw it into place. I'll tighten that rascal down. We don't want it coming loose. Yeah, it's good. So there we go with that. Good function, good and crisp. And now I can put the cap back on. Whoop, I can get it on right. There we go. There we go. So that part is done. And we're coming on along, guys. We are getting close to finishing the lower receiver. All right, now we're ready for the next step. We're going to put in the rear takedown pin. So the first thing we're going to do, unlike the other one, we're going to go ahead and drop the takedown pin in. There's a little trench. You want the trench, when you put it in, facing to the rear. like so. I'm going to get that as lined up as best I can to the facing flush rear. I'm going to drop my D10 in, the little hole in the back. And it is double-sided, so whatever way you drop it in, it's fine. You just twist the little pin down until it can't twist, and that's how you know it's caught it. I'm going to drop the spring in. Now this spring, it's okay to clip. So what you're going to do, you're going to make an index point where you're going to clip it. I'm going to get it down to about, I want to push it down a little bit because let's see how much I can. Okay. Because you actually have a set screw to keep this from being a chore when you're putting on your buffer tube. So this is going to be awesome. So what I'm going to do, first I'm going to get a little oil. You always want to put oil on a spring. If you have cutting oil, great, but just any oil. I'm going to use gun oil, this unicorn oil here. I'm going to put a little bit on that spring to make it a little less brittle when I clip it. I'm going to push it down and get a index point. I'm going to go to about right. Let's see here. I think I'm going to make my cut about here. You want to cut too little than too much because you can always cut more, but it's going to be hard to regenerate spring. So I am going to get my little needle nose pliers. If you have wire pliers, great too. And I'm going to make a point, just a little kink where I need to cut. And so I know I need to clip it right about here. And I'm going to do just that. Make sure you're protecting your eyes. Squeeze and clip. There we go. So we have that part clipped. We're going to give it another go. We're going to drop it in. There we go. Well, that went flying, but I see it. So I'm going to put that in there. Good. Get that in view. So I still have a little bit left, but that's fine. Now I'm going to use the smallest of the smallest hex wrenches. This is a 0.5 hex wrench for the set screw, the 440 set screw. Goes in the end, like so, and that's where I'm going to leave it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my lower in position. I'm going to get this because it's on snug. I'm just going to push it down ever so slightly. And and I almost lost it. Because this thing is going to be tense, but that's okay. We're not going to do many outtakes because I think, while some people can do this smoothly, we're going to show you just the real process of what happens when we are doing this thing here. So I want you guys to see the every guy building the AR, and I am definitely the every man when it comes down to this. I'm just going to get that screw up to start feeding if I can. All right, we're gonna get it eventually, and I might even have to cut more, and that's the beauty of this. I can always cut more, but you can never grow it back. I'm just going to do this. Let's do this. There we go. And it's caught. And I'm able to get you back in camera. So what I did, I just basically I held the screw down and just started rotating the lower. There we go. I'm getting it focused. So I don't want to go too far down. I just want to bring it flush. A little protruding, so I'm going to go down a little bit more. Because I want that castle nut to go down flush. Great, I can back it up just a little bit more. Nope, I don't want to go down, I want to go up. Back it out. There we go. Perfect. That's right where we want it, right there. We have it screwed down flush. And now, if I ever want to change my buffer tube system out, I don't have to worry about that spring flying out because we have that set screw in place. I put a set screw in all my builds now. Even if it's not drilled out, it's very easy with the kit to get a little spot drilled out for the set screw. It makes it worth it if you ever change up something in your build. So now we got that part done. Let's go on to the next step. We are now about to put on our buffer tube, but before we do, we're going to put a little bit more aerogel on some parts. It might be an unnecessary part, but it's a part I like to do just for caution's sake. I just don't want anything ever binding up if I ever want to change something out and have some difficulty later. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, with my finger, just lightly go around the threads. Don't want to get it in the tube. Just apply it around the threads here. Nice liberal coating, but not to be sloppy. I am not using the EPC buffer tube. I have one around the house that works with this build. But it would be a little, this step would be just a little bit easier with the EP, just convenient, I should say. It's not a difficult step. And I'm gonna put a little aerogel on the castle nut here. Go back for a little bit more. Just a wee bit more. Aeroshell grease. I think I said aerogel. Aeroshell grease there. Just getting it all around. Good. Get the extra off with my little paper towel. So I'm going to handle my lower. I'm going to put a little on the inside here. There we go. And now I'm going to wipe my hands clean. Got my aeroshell on there, so now I'm going to put on my castle nut. There we go. Screw that on. Good. Get that all nice and seasoned. And don't worry about the grease. You'll be able to clean that up later. Put on my castle plate. Match up with the index points. Have that little bump section facing out and towards your lower. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get the lower. And I'm going to get this in with the lower. Just go ahead and mash that up. I don't have to worry about the spring popping out. And I'm just going to screw this down. Oh, you know what? I guess I don't. I want to wait till I get that where I want to get it. So what I'm looking for, you see that little hole? I want to get it right before I get to the hole. Back that up. There we go. Right before. And the reason I want it right before is this. Sorry, I'm out of camera. So, got that stand up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my buffer spring retainer spring and drop it in. Now I'm going to drop the little buffer spring retainer in as well, like so. And I'm just going to press it down until I come right to it. So now what we have is we have the lip of the buffer tube just barely holding that detent in. Want to make sure everything's lined up here, and then I'm going to press that buffer, that plate, castle plate in, and that actually keeps you fairly lined up. Very good. And then I'm just going to tighten this down hand tight, like so. Test for function. Make sure I'm not messing up the detent. It's working. And now I'm going to go to the garage. We're going to go to the vice clamp, and I'm going to use my tool to just torque this down. Not going to use a torque wrench. You just tighten it down fairly tight as you want to make it. We're back in the garage, and so what we're going to do, we're going to use the Duo Block vice block. This is a cool little device when you're making your AR pistol caliber, your pistol caliber ARs. This side is for the 9mm, this side is for 45 caliber, and you just flip it over whenever. So we're gonna be using the 9. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do now, I'm gonna set my lower down, and I'm gonna put the proper side down, the 45 caliber side down with the 9mm either side facing up. I'm going to lower it onto the mag well until it clicks into place. It's locked, and there we go. Now this step is fairly easy. I have my castle nut hand tightened, and I'm just simply going to align my armorer's wrench. I'm going to go in like so with my armorer's wrench, line up the notches, and just crank it. Keeping it at much in spot as possible, but those retaining notches will hold it fairly steady. So I'm just going to crank it. Give it a good cranking, to be honest with you. I'm going to season this a little bit too, wouldn't hurt. Tack. On and off. On and off. And one more time. And on. And just crank it. So I feel it's good and tight, like so. So I have it good and tight there. I'm going to take this off, and we're going to take a look at it, make sure it's lined up. I'm eyeballing it here to make sure everything is in alignment. It looks like it is. I'm happy with it. So if I wanted to stake it down, I'm going to bring this closer. Let's see if we can get this to pop into focus. There you go. There's a little notch to put the pinning stake in, whatever you call that tool. You put it in, you hammer it down, and this would stake your castle nut down if you wanted to. I usually don't stake the castle nut down, but if you wanted to do so, this is how you would do it on a castle nut. Oh, if I can get it back into focus again, like that. You would put your punch down in there and give it a good little tap, maybe 2, and then you'd be staked. Now let's go back in and put in our fire control group. This is the fire control group. This is also probably one of the more challenging parts of the build, just because you're working with springs that are under a little bit of tension. So our parts consist of the hammer spring, hammer and trigger pin, the disconnect spring, the trigger, and the trigger spring. I think that's what they're called anyway, but that's what we're going to call them today. So what we're going to do is go ahead and get them assembled the best we can. We're going to try to do this without going back to the garage because it's hot in there. If I can do it without the assist of a vice clamp, we'll do it. But if need be, we'll return to the garage. Let's get to it. I'm going to put together my trigger portion of the fire control group first, and that's going to include the trigger, the disconnect spring, and the trigger spring. So what you have is, in your disconnect spring is flared. One end is bigger than the other. You're going to take your large end, and if you look in your trigger portion, there's a little notch. Inside there's like a little indentation of a circle. You're going to take the big end and wedge it down into that. It should pop right in the grooves. It's slightly grooved. I'm going to take the disconnect, line the notch right over the spring where it's poking out, and there you go. Then I'm going to take my spring, so I'm going to have it like so. The legs are going to be kicking up. There's like little feet laying up. This little notch here is going to go right under this portion here. And so it just takes a little careful finagling, slight tension on the spring. Don't damage it. I'm just going to pull it up a little bit on this side to get it over, while pulling it a little bit over on this side, get it over, and there you go. That's how you want, that's how it's going to look at the end of the day. The next part is the bane of a lot of AR builders' existence, and that's seating the trigger and then running the trigger pin through the lower, then through the trigger, the disconnector, and out the other end of the lower. Now, there are tools to make this easier. One of the things would make this easier if I was in the garage in my vise to hold it steady, but it's hot in there and I really don't want to go back in there. So what I'm going to do, and if I had a what they call a slave pin, I would basically put this all together, run the slave pin through, drop it in, and then gently hammer my trigger pin through, pushing the slave pin out, and it would seat. We're going to do it using a 5 32 roll pin punch, and it's going to take some finagling. But what we're going to do, we're not going to insert it in with the disconnector on, but we are going to have the spring on. When I push it in, let's say this is the shelf of the lower, I'm not going to have it like this. I'm going to have the legs resting on that shelf of the lower with the trigger coming out of the hole at the bottom of the lower, like so. And it'll make more sense when you see it in action. Let's get to it right now. We're going to take the lower, and I'm going to flip it up so you can see what I'm talking about. You're going to feed the little, what we know as the trigger, through the hole with those legs resting on the shelf. Now your there you go. Disconnect pin might not be as tight as it is on this one, so you're going to make sure you don't want that disconnect pin to shoot out, because I've had those things come out more than once. So I'm making sure it's seating nicely and deep and down in there. And I'm going to change angle up a little bit. Now, before we move on to the next step, we're going to work first from the right side, feeding the roll pin punch through and into the first part of the hole in the trigger. We're going to drop in the disconnect, feed the roll pin through the disconnect, out to the other side of the trigger, onto the other side. So that's what we're going to do first. So let's go ahead and get this started. We're going to put the roll pin in right there, just barely. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to push this down. And what I'm, if I can get it in focus, yeah. Get this out of the way. What I'm going to try to do is feed it into the hole. My finger's going to be in the way because I need to see what I'm doing. But you know what? I'll show you. It popped out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this down, and hopefully you can see around my finger. As I push that down, that roll pin is going to go through. Let's imagine the disconnect was in a spot. It would feed through the disconnect, through the roll, the other part of the trigger, and out the other side of the lower. That's what you would want to happen. So easier said than done, right? So I'm going to take the disconnect, make sure that notch goes over the spring. Good. A++ so far, right? Now I'm going to push it down, and I'm going to start feeding the roll pin punch through. Good. Now I'm going to finagle that disconnect. And I might even have to take it out, line that hole up. Let's see here. See what that looks like. Make sure that make sure everything's in place. You make sure that notch is over that spring. It is. And then, oh yes, good. We got it through. Now I'm just going to make sure I can get it all the way through. There we go. We got it through there. Now we're going to push it through. I see it through. Now we're going to look to the other side of the lower. And there it is. Just like that. Flip it over. I'm going to use my winch. Well, you know what? I'm going to use my... I'm just going to prop it up slightly like this. I'm going to get my armorer's hammer with a nylon tip. You could use the brass tip, but you don't want to mar your pin. We're going to start, remember, with the smooth side first, and gently push everything just back. Good. We're just going to push everything through hand force first. Ah! And I got greedy. Got greedy. So we're going to back it up, and then we just got to start all over again. Okay, so we got it seated back in from my mistake. What I did previously, when I had it going through, I pulled the pin punch out before I did this step. So as I know that the pin is seated and I'm going through, I get to a point where I'm going to meet resistance with the nylon side. I'm going to gently wrap it through. And then at a point, you're going to know it's through, like so. And I just pulled it prematurely. I'm going to use my universal bench block. And get it the rest of the way through. Got a little bit more work to do, so I'm going to make sure everything's lined up. I need to put a little force down. I can almost push it through with the hand. The nylon side. Get it through flush. Look on the other side, and you can really almost hand pressure get that thing through. And there you go. We're all set. That's seated. Now we're ready for the hammer and the hammer spring. So we're going to go ahead and get that together, and it's really simple. So as you see my orientation here, the closed end of the hammer spring goes to the rear of the hammer, or where the hammer hook is what I like to call it, and then the open end points out that way. So basically over the little notches, very similar to how we did it before. You just kind of gently stretch the springs, manipulate them where they're just going over like that, and you have it on just like that. Now we're ready to drop it in. The hammer is a lot easier to put in, for me anyway, than the trigger part. So we're still going to use the 5 32 roll pin punch, and we got this put together. Let's just go ahead and drop it in. So we're going to get this ready. I'm going to position it where you can see what I'm doing. So the flat part is going to be facing the front part of the rifle, like so. Basically, you're going to drop it in like so. The legs go behind the little springs that you see there, and the holes are going to line up right there. So I'm going to do it like so, and I'm going to press it into place. Now, as I'm looking, I do have a little room. I thought that the mag release was going to interfere, but it shouldn't. So I'm just going to push that into place. Oh, pickles. And it's the only reason this is difficult because I'm trying to get this on camera. It's not this hard. Flexing it into space, into place, making sure I'm still where I'm needing to be with my pin. Yeah, I'm good. There we go. Perfect. So I got that part in, and now I'm just going to roll and feed it on through. Like so. Now I can't get my my roll pin all the way in because of that mag well release there, mag release. But I can still seat it. Again, from the left side, smooth side going first. And then I'm just going to kind of push it through hand tight. Let's see here. How's it looking? I didn't mean to wedge that out because I want to, like we were saying, we want to make sure we're using the nylon part of our armorer's hammer to just kind of gently seat that in like so. See, that was way easier. So we want to cock it back. We're going to test our functions. Let me get it over here. Oh, excuse me. Now you don't want to draw fire. You just want to kind of let it go like so. Pull it back like so. Like so. Let's test our safety. No fire. is not doing it. So great. There we go. So we have a working fire control group. We're getting close to being done with the essential parts of the lower. We are now going to put in the buffer spring and the buffer weight. This is the Aero Precision enhanced EPC buffer system. The only thing that's not the part of the EPC kit is the buffer tube itself. So you have the EPC recommended buffer spring. I'm gonna actually, what I'm gonna do, because this thing it fits very tight. So I'm gonna just go ahead and get that buffer weight already in the spring. I'm gonna feed it in, and you want to be careful not to get it hung up on the little retainer, and it's going to be a lot of spring in a tight spot. So I'm just going to go back like so, and it goes in really easy. And as you see, there it is right there. It doesn't have like the little wedges that you slide over like it usually does on a buffer weight. You just basically get that little retention pin down and push the weight in over it, and it went in really easy. And the lower assembly is essentially done. The only thing we're going to do now, this is going to be a pistol build, so we're going to use the shockwave fin there, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on. So I'm just going to started getting it fed on. I'm going to pull this down really hard. So what I'm doing is I'm essentially trying to pull this far enough down where it will lock into the little gap there. Once you get it in, that's the hard part though. There we go. And then we are seated. Now I can adjust it as needed. And you see it adjusts way easier. I think that's as far back as I go and close up as I go. Let's take a look at it. And there it is. The lower is complete.